Hey everyone, so today's DIY is going to be super simple. It's going to be for a fabric covered picture frame, and today we're actually going to be using some of the leftover fabric from my last DIY. The picture frame is just from Goodwill. It was $1. It doesn't really matter what your frame looks like whatsoever because we are going to be covering it. I do recommend using ones that have square corners though instead of rounded corners. It's just a little easier. And I went ahead and traced the inside of the frame onto the fabric so I could kind of get a rough idea of how much of an opening I needed. And now what I'm doing here is I'm just going to kind of sketch in the extra amount of fabric I'm going to need to wrap around the inside. So think of it in a sense, if you're familiar with sewing, kind of like a seam allowance, I guess, in a way. I'm just going to go ahead and draw in the corners and then just connect them all. And this is just the fabric that's going to wrap around the inside of the frame. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut out the center. Now we want to cut the innermost part. We do not want to cut on the first lines that we drew, but the last lines that we drew, because you cannot add the fabric once you take it away. You want to make sure that you have enough fabric to cover the whole frame so you can't see the frame exposed on the edges, on the sides, or anything. It's just going to be completely covered. Alright, so now I have gone ahead and cut out the center, and I'm going to start and glue the fabric onto two of the sides. This way it just kind of gives me a good area to work with and make sure that I don't have fabric flying around too much. So now we are actually going to cut on those lines that we drew on the corners. And this is, I guess, the best way to show you guys, and I'm not good at explaining things, but I'm showing you guys what I meant by that in the beginning. So we're cutting the corners, and then we're going to take that fabric and just wrap it around the inside and glue it down again with some hot glue. And then that way you're not going to see the frame even on the inside of the picture, and you don't have fabric that is just kind of like popping up or coming loose. So right now I'm just going ahead and making sure that the fabric is going to be nice and tight and glue it down there. You want to make sure that you don't have slack on the fabric, and you can just go ahead and do that on all of the insides and just complete it off that way. You can also add a little bit of hot glue onto the edges where you made the cuts, just so the fabric will not fray as much. Another thing you can do is instead of hot glue, you can just use Mod Podge, and that's the finished look of that inside. Now I just went ahead and added the glass and the back, just so I could work with it a little bit better. It leaves me with a little bit more of a solid work surface, I guess. Now I'm just trimming off the extra fabric so you can easily glue it over and you don't have too much fabric to work with. You want to make sure that the fabric, once again, is pulled nice and tight. And for the remaining two sides, I'm actually going to start in the center. This way I can guarantee that there's not going to be some, kind of gap of fabric in the center of the sides of the frames, and that once I get to the edges, I can make sure that the fabric is nice and tight and there's just really no loose fabric. And if you're planning on actually hanging these on the wall using like a command strip, say, I would recommend making sure that there's at least one section of the frame on the back that's not covered with fabric. You can just cut out a little square. The command strips usually stick better to the actual frames than they do to fabric. Just an FYI, so you don't have to go ahead later on and try to fix that. And right now I'm actually showing you guys how to glue down the corners. It's pretty simple. You just fold the fabric over, make sure it's nice and tight, and glue it down on the back. Then you can just go ahead and do that on all of the corners, and you are going to have your finished frame. I hope you guys enjoyed this DIY. Make sure to leave any questions or comments down below, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.